The level schemes and restriction schemes control how compliance works in your instance, and it will give you the complete control over how you use classification levels and restrictions so you can align this to the way your organization works. If you want to control everything centrally and keep a more standardized approach across all your spaces, then you can easily do this. On the other hand, if you wanted to take a more customized approach and build specific groups of classification levels and tailored access restrictions for individual teams or spaces, you can also do this. The choice is entirely yours. After all, we don't believe in a one-size-fits-all approach, and your organization shouldn't be restricted by this in compliance. We've given you the flexibility that you need to choose the approach that is right for you and your organization. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create your own level schemes with custom classification levels, and also how you can create custom restriction schemes to go with these. Once set up, I'll show you how you can apply these to your entire system or individual Confluence spaces. And with all that being said, let's jump in. So we're going to start with classification levels and level schemes. A level scheme is essentially a custom group of classification levels. And before we can create a level scheme, we just need to make sure that we've created all the classification levels that we want to use. So I'll jump into compliance quickly, and I will access the classification levels in the settings. So in settings, click levels, and this will bring up the classification levels that you have available in compliance. As you can see here, there are 4 available levels, but I also want to create one for the management team. So let's quickly do this now. I'll click create level, give it the management team name. I can add a description if I wish, and I'll go ahead and give it a color. Now the management team level is displayed here, like you can see, and we're now able to move on to the next stage, which is adding this to a level scheme. So let's click into level schemes here. This is where you can create custom groupings of classification levels. So you'll see at the top the default level scheme. This option is always available. It'll always have all the classification levels, but you don't have to use it. So let's go ahead and start creating our own. So I'll click create level scheme. We'll call this management team level scheme. Again, I can give it a description if I wish, which will just differentiate it from the other level schemes. And then here I can choose which levels I want to be a part of this scheme. So in this example, the management team only need 3 levels for their spaces. They need management team, restricted, and internal. So I'll drag over management team, restricted, and internal. And then now you can see the level scheme has been added to the list and it's ready to use. So before we add the level scheme to the management team space, let's set up the page access restrictions they need as well. So next up, jump into the restriction schemes. Here you can see a similar story, the default restriction scheme at the top, which will always be available, and then custom restriction schemes that you can create throughout. So let's go ahead and create our own restriction scheme, and we'll call this a management team restriction scheme. Go ahead and click create. And once created, you'll see this page where you can set who has edit and view permissions, but also who has view permissions. So it gives you the flexibility to choose the type of permissions that people in your instance will have depending on the classification level. Now you don't need to set up your restrictions for every single classification level. It very much depends on how you want this to work in your Confluence instance. So set it up the way that works for you and your organization. So in this video, again, we'll just create the restrictions for the 3 classification levels in a management team space. And just as a reminder, those levels are management team, restricted, and internal. So I'll go ahead and set this up now. I'm just going to focus on edit and view permissions here. So I'll start with adding myself for the user. We'll add the management team group here, and I'll add other colleagues of mine. So that's all set up, ready to go. The individuals and the groups that are in these fields will have permission to view or edit, or just view the page at those classification levels. So I'll go ahead and click save. I'll apply this to existing pages that have this scheme. And that is set up and ready to go. So it's time to apply both the level scheme and the restriction schemes to your spaces in Confluence. So let's jump to the scope section of compliance. And scope is essentially the control center of how levels and restrictions are used throughout your Confluence instance. And as mentioned at the beginning of the video, you could apply the same classifications and page restrictions across your entire Confluence instance using the Manage Globally option that you see at the top of the screen. Or if you want a more tailored approach, let's go with a more customized option where we're going to apply the management team's level scheme and restriction scheme to the Project Phoenix space. So I need to turn off the Manage Globally option here, and this will allow me to choose and customize the space level. So I'll enable this for Project Phoenix, and then I will start changing the level schemes. And if you have classification levels applied in this space already, you just need to reconfigure what levels will be displayed for these pages. Click Migrate, that'll update, and that's now ready to go. And we just need to repeat the same process for the restriction schemes and just update to apply that to it. And there we are, that is good to go. So the final step now is just to show you this in action. So if I go to a page within the Project Phoenix space, I'll go to Design A under Shuttle Designs, and here this page is pending classification. So now if I change this to internal, the page is updated and the permissions here have also updated. And this aligns with the permissions that we set up in compliance. Now if I go ahead and change this to management team, it should become more restrictive in terms of the number of permissions that have been provided. And again, this is based on what we set up in compliance. So it's now management team. If I click into the options here, this has become far more restricted based on the configuration settings that we set up just now. So that's the restriction schemes. Now the other thing to point out is the level schemes. When I click onto the level here, I'm only presented with 3 classification levels, whereas in compliance you saw there were 5. And again, this is the level scheme working and only providing the levels that you want in those specific spaces. So there we have it, a quick run through of how schemes can give you greater control over how the classification levels and page restrictions in compliance are used across your entire Confluence instance. If you're new to compliance and you're considering trying it out, you can get a free 30-day trial on the Atlassian Marketplace by following the link in the video description below. And just remember, we're here to help you get the most out of compliance. So if you want to learn more about any of the features in the product, be sure to check out our user guides by following the link that's displayed on the screen now. Or if you have any questions, just send an email to support@fox.io and one of our customer support team will be happy to help.